We'll start with the identify function, the foundation of NIST CSF 2.0. Here we answer 3 questions. What do we have? What truly matters? And what can go wrong? Everything else in your security program depends on getting this context and risk picture, right? In NIST CSF 2.0, the identify function is where everything begins. Think of it as answering a single question. What actually matters here? That means understanding your assets, the critical data you hold, the key business processes you support, and the dependencies that keep them running. If you skip this step, every protect, detect, respond, recover, or govern decision is basically a guess. Solid risk management is impossible until you can clearly see your environment. In CSF 2.0, the identify function acts like a system check for your organization. Asset management is knowing exactly what hardware, software, data, and services you have, and which ones are critical. Risk assessment is about understanding threats, vulnerabilities, and business impact so you can prioritize. Improvement is the feedback loop, using assessments, incidents, and metrics to mature your processes over time. All of this stays tightly linked to your business environment and governance structures. These outcomes don't tell you which tools to buy. They define the goals that guide control selection and reveal security gaps. Asset management in CSF is really about one thing: knowing what you actually have to protect. Discovery is the front door to everything else: risk assessments, controls, and especially vulnerability management. Here, we care about 4 main asset types: physical devices, software and platforms, data itself, and external or cloud services. For each, your inventory should be complete, accurate, kept up to date, and clearly assigned to accountable owners. Within the identify function, business environment is about translating assets into mission impact. Servers, databases, and networks are not protected for their own sake. They exist to support concrete business goals like revenue, safety, and service availability. Practically, this comes down to 3 actions. First, understand your ecosystem role, where your organization sits in critical infrastructure and supply chains. Second, map key processes end-to-end, including data flows and dependencies. Third, identify stakeholders who own those processes. Without this alignment, technical controls won't reliably reduce real business risk. CSF 2.0 introduces govern as its own function, and that changes how we think about the whole framework. Govern is about who makes decisions, what the risk appetite is, and how cybersecurity supports business goals. The identify function feeds govern with bottom-up intelligence: assets, risks, and dependencies. Govern then sends guidance back down, directing identify and the other functions with top-down strategy, priorities, and acceptable risk levels. In CSF 2.0, risk assessment is about turning uncertainty into structured decisions. Start with the classic idea. You only have meaningful risk when a valuable asset faces a credible threat and a real vulnerability. From there, follow a simple loop. Identify what can go wrong across technology, people, physical sites, and geopolitics. Analyze each scenario for likelihood and impact. Evaluate those results against your organization's risk tolerance. Then treat the risk. Mitigate it, transfer it, avoid it, or accept it, with clear justification and ongoing monitoring. To operationalize CSF 2.0, every risk needs a clear line from the asset to the treatment plan. Begin with a solid asset inventory. What systems, data, and services actually matter? Then describe realistic threat scenarios targeting those assets and estimate the business consequences if they succeed. Next, tie each risk to specific CSF outcomes. That's how you prove your risk register is aligned with the framework and with organizational objectives. Finally, document decisions and keep them alive. Monitoring, incidents, and changes in the environment should continuously update your risks and treatments. In CSF 2.0, supply chain risk management means your attack surface includes every vendor, partner, and cloud provider you rely on. You start by identifying which third parties are truly critical to your mission and which are not, because they don't all deserve the same level of scrutiny. Then you manage risk over the entire lifecycle: due diligence before onboarding, continuous monitoring while in use, and structured offboarding. And you align supplier requirements with your own risk appetite, so contracts, controls, and oversight reflect how much risk the business is actually willing to accept. Think of identify as building a single, living picture of your organization. Asset management tells you what you have and where it lives. Business environment explains why it matters and who cares. Govern and risk management define who decides and what acceptable risk actually means. Supply chain shows which vendors and partners you depend on to operate. When you synthesize all of that, you get a unified context that drives everything else. Which assets to harden, what to monitor, which incidents matter most, and what must be recovered first. Moving from insight to action with CSF 2.0 is about sequencing, not perfection. First, start small around your most critical assets or services. Let that define your initial scope and profiles. Next, formalize governance. Clarify roles, policies, and decision paths, so CSF work isn't just best effort. Then, institutionalize risk. Use repeatable methods to rate, prioritize, and track CSF gaps. After that, deliberately strengthen supply chain risk management rather than treating vendors as an afterthought. Finally, iterate. Revisit profiles, tiers, and metrics regularly, and expand scope as you learn. If you remember one thing from this module, make it this. Situational awareness is your security program's foundation. The identify function tells you what matters, how it supports the business, and where risk really lives. From there, protect, detect, respond, and recover become targeted, not random. Effective cybersecurity begins with understanding your context and keeping that understanding continuously up to date.